The message reached the Concorde spire at midshift, carried on a courier beam so compressed it arrived as a scream of light. Archivist Sally Vroon, who had trained her whole life to listen for the past, was the first to hear the future tearing. She stood alone beneath the isinglass canopy of the Hall of Edicts, listening to the beam unfold into words. The hall was quiet at that hour, its thousand etched laws glowing a faint blue against the dark. Most delegates had withdrawn to their habitat rings to sleep or plot. The spire's air tasted of old ozone-old promises. Sally tasted the fear even before the transcript printed into her palm/slab.ERYTH-5 fallen. Krell Dominion claims, administrative control, human casualties, 200 for confirmed, 853, unaccounted, broadcast attached. Sally opened the broadcast. On her slab, the Krell Regent voice appeared without ceremony. A sweeping mantle of chitin framed a mouth of grinding plates. The voice was oily soft, translated through the spire's ancient heuristics. Aerith 5 resists no longer. We commend their laboring species to the Dominion. All claims by the dormant polities of soul are void by neglect. As for the Concorde's warnings, superstition is not law. Behind the Regent voice, rows of bound settlers knelt on a dust-stripped parade ground. A banner hung above them, a stylized spiral, the Krell's emblem for Dominion. Humans, men, women, a gray-haired elder with a clenched jaw stared into the feed. Most were silent. One woman lifted her head, as if she could look through the camera into Sally's eyes. Her lip bled. She said nothing at all. Don't, Sally whispered, but to whom she wasn't sure. The feed cut. In the Hall of Edicts, the warning etched at child height at the base of the central plinth seemed to glimmer, like a bioluminescent scar. Sally knew the line by heart. She could trace it with her eyes closed. Law 0 never enraged the humans. It was not ornate. It did not name sanctions or procedures. It was a code the way a cliff face is a warning. It had been carved 7 centuries ago. When the chartering war ended and the Concorde crawled from the wreckage of 10,000 ships, the authors had declined a legal preface. They had relied on memory. Most delegates called it apocrypha, a myth enshrined by traumatized founders, a story to tell children who asked why Earth never sent ambassadors anymore. The Concorde had learned to smile at Law 0. Sally did not smile. She authorized an emergency session. On Aerith 5, the sky shed its usual gentle copper to make room for the shock white gouge of atmospheric entry. The Krell dropships had fallen that morning like bad omens. The colony had heard the drills for years. Today the drills became their bones. Jasmine O'Keefe sprinted the perimeter between greenhouses, mantling girders slick with condensation and grit. The shields around Dome C hummed as they tightened, drawing excess power from the geothermal tap. She had locked down the nursery first. That had been instinct. Now she was in the slow calculus between enough time and no time left at all. Jazz. Came Timo's voice in her ear. They're over the ridge. 10 minutes, maybe less. Copy. Jasmine dropped to a walkway. Her hands shook as she sealed a haptic panel and keyed a maintenance override. Send the kids to sublevels and keep them there. Protocol basilisk. Silence on the line. Then a choked laugh. You think this is funny? It'll make them feel like they're part of an op instead of a panic. Timo, she said, not looking up as the panel turned green. We stick to training. We stick to training. The greenhouse's last gate slid into place. Beyond the transparent plasteel, the orchard's columns glowed with photosynthetic light. Gnarled apple trees, grown from earth seed stock and coaxed to survive this thin, bright world, stood orderly and unaware. Jasmine touched the glass. The colony was only 38 years old. The trees, 23. She'd helped graft half of them. You think the Concorde will send? Timo began. No, Jasmine said. They'll send observers. And a strongly worded fear. She meant declaration. Fear was what came out of her mouth. They both knew there would be time for neither. The first shock hit Dome C like a swallowed thunderclap. Jasmine felt the structure take the blow, disperse it, flex. She braced. Above, the shield's field lines brightened. Amber alerts scrolled along her wristband. External impact. Source kinetic. Another hit. Another. Then the door on the far end exploded inward. The Krell entry team moved like a many-limbed shadow. Their armor refracted light into geometry. Their weapons hummed in a register that drew teeth to ache. The lead soldier's crest caught the greenhouse's glow and threw it back in a cold rainbow. Jasmine had time to raise her hands, to say wait, to think, wildly, of apples falling. The Krell did not shoot. They surrounded her in a precise half-circle intimidation as algorithm. The lead soldier spoke in strained Concord common, its mouthpart translator modulating over the invasive scent of citrus oil and hot metal. Compliance. Jasmine looked past them to the broken gate. Beyond, the orchard was spilling its light into the corridor like spilled milk. She pictured Timo in the nursery, telling jokes he didn't think were funny. She pictured children's breath steam in the cold of Sublevel 2. She pictured every human ancestor who had left Earth with a promise like a blade in their mouth. We will have peace, or we will make it. She lowered her hands. Compliance, she said. But on record, Aerith 5 is acknowledged within the Concord as under the Soul Charter. You are violating. A backhanded strike cut her sentence short. It was far more theatrical than necessary. Blood salted her tongue. The Krell do not have to humiliate their targets, Jasmine thought. But they enjoyed efficient rituals. The lead soldier gestured. Ownership is a superstition, it said, and turned its whole attention to the nursery gate, on the Krell Dominion's flagship, the Vrexen Fetch. Regent Voice Talek stood with forearms behind its back and watched the planet through the viewport's haze. The ship's cathedral of a bridge hummed with asynchronous minds and machines. Around the Regent Voice, the lesser castes made their bows in micro-movements. Talek did not notice. It was already composing its victory address to the Grand Assembly. Aerith 5 was not supposed to be first blood. There had been discussions a legal pretense would have been better. A drone-run habitat with 0 visible children even best. But the Dominion's calculus had shifted when scouts discovered the geothermal tap at Aerith 5's southern pole. Strategic necessity. Moral inconvenience. The phrase would play well in the assembly. Occupation status? Talek asked. Surface secured in all quadrants, replied the tactician, casting notes into Talek's peripheral implant. Resistance, sporadic, untrained. Civilian centers contained. We have 112 hostages visible and another 800 tagged. Broadcasting control claim on all channels. Concord Net suggests deliberation, no immediate deployment. Talek let the numbers settle in the hive of its mind. It had an instinct humans would later misname as arrogance. In truth, it was hunger polished by centuries of victories. And the soul systems? Quiet, the tactician said. As predicted, the humans withdrew long cycles ago, Regent Voice. They left their outer colonies to drift. Their last overt fleet traffic was a century and a half ago, Talek finished. It had studied their legends like a child studies ghosts. The law will be cited, and then it will be ignored. Talek turned to a hololith. The Dominion's borders glowed a triumphant violet. The Concord's central axis sat like a hesitant pearl. The soul expanse Earth and its silent, guarded moons was a dark patch without telemetry ghosts or trade beacons. A deliberate hole in the fabric. Talek's antennae quivered with contempt. The humans' withdrawal had been called many things over the centuries. Grief, pragmatism, strategy, rot. Talek's favorite was atrophy. Muscles not used, power not exercised, weapons not fired. Begin resource extraction, it said. Minimally destructive. We prefer them alive. It glanced back at the viewport. Alive and watching. The emergency session at the Concord Spire took 12 minutes to convene and 10 seconds to fracture. Delegates spilled into the hall in a flurry of fabrics and pheromones. The air alive with translation sense and voice threads. The Spire's circular days lit in segments as each delegation joined the quorum. The Tsari Empire executed its bow with mathematical specificity. The Kesh, starfish of velvet and veins, perched in a pool of recirculated brine. The Gar swarmed, then condensed into a decision shape shaped like a cube. The human seat, a simple obsidian plate carved with a holly leaf, remained unoccupied, and had for 502 years. Sully Varun stood at the plinth. She had braided her long hair twice to keep her hands from fidgeting. We have seen the broadcast, she said. Her voice amplified not by machines, but by the hall's old acoustics. We will enter the message into the record. Aerith 5 is a Terran colony. The Krell Dominion has seized it by force in violation of the Chartering War's end clauses. The oldest law is implicated. Laughter rippled, just enough to sting. A superstition. The Tsari ambassador intoned. Its body was tall and silver, the color of mathematics. Sully thought uncharitably. We respect the symbol, archivist. We do not legislate on symbols. The law exists, Sully said. It exists because the Concorde once watched Earth burn 10 fleets to cinders and forced a peace, by surviving what no other species would endure. It exists because your archives are full of humans, the Kesh sage said gently. We honor your history, but we govern the present. The Dominion claims neglect. The Soul Charter is stale. Sully locked her jaw. Law Zero was carved after the Concorde watched human anger reshape starfields. It is not subordinate to trade rotation schedules or legal fictions. It's a cliff warning carved by a survivor with a burnt hand. The Dominion is not afraid. The Krell attaché said, voice like a molt. It stood under the neutral ring, its privilege as a non-member state. We invite the Concorde to be reasonable. The Gar tightened to a smaller cube. The Dominion pretends reason, but reasons like a digestion. We propose censure. We propose sanctions. Sanctions, muttered someone. Against a war machine with more mouths than fronts. Sully counted her breath. She had believed her role was to hold memory, not to swing it like a weapon. But memory had only one use in emergencies, warning. Friends, she said, and the word cost her. The oldest law is not a superstition. It was pinned above cribs during the Chartering War. It is spoken in whispers on trade barges when a fight breaks out, and someone with Terran blood is in the room. It is tattooed on the palms of militia on rust worlds where humans mine in silence, and teach their children to keep their tempers like knives in sheaths. Never enrage the humans. The hall quieted despite itself. Words, when they carried that much past, silenced their own future for a heartbeat. What do you propose? Asked the Tsari. Public censure of the Krell, Sully said. An immediate peacekeeping force to interpose at Aerith 5. Admiral Hessian's line is closest. And a message to Sol. Sol does not answer, the Kesh said, sorrowful. They have not answered for centuries. Then we remind them that the galaxy still remembers them. Sully said. We call and we make that call into a bell that everyone can hear. And if they do not answer, we proceed as if they will, which is to say, the Tsari asked, we proceed as if we prefer living. Jasmine and the other adults were chained along the colony's main thoroughfare by mid-afternoon. The Krell did not need chains. They had stun lassos and shiver fields, but they used them. Old iron painted with galaxy-grade polymers. Because the weight did something to his spine that electricity could not. The children weren't visible. This meant they'd been sequestered as bargaining tokens or as hurt that could be applied later. Timo stood down from Jasmine. He caught her eye and rolled his shoulders the way he did. Before he lied to the kids about vegetables. Smile. He mouthed, show your teeth. She mouthed back. A drone hovered close. Jasmine could see her reflection in its glossy carapace, a human face streaked with dust, hair shaved close on one side, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She wondered what the galaxy saw when it looked at them, now colonists from a species that had vanished into its own shadow. She wondered if the camera could hear her heart. Regent voice Talik's speech poured from the speakers. It might have been written by a clever clerk. It probably had. Jasmine heard the phrases. Waxed thin by use and polished by the contempt of victors. Peaceful transition. Industrial stewardship. Administrative guardianship. She stared at the drone until her eyes watered. When the speech ended, the drone did something Jasmine did not expect. It swiveled, leaned, and settled its lens so near her mouth that if she spoke, her breath would fog the glass. Do you wish to make a statement? It asked in common. The Krell enjoyed theater after all. Jasmine thought of Lot 12 in the orbital market at Chint, where they had bought bolts of fabric printed with the constellations of home. She thought of the apple trees. She thought of human children sleeping under basalt. She took a breath. Humans remember. She said softly, the words shaped by a grandmother who had whispered them once in a bunk cradled by a spinning ship. We remember who takes and who asks. We remember who hurts and who heals. We remember what we are when we have to be. We are peaceful until we are not. And when we are not, we do not stop. The drone. perhaps considering itself very clever, amplified this to a dozen nearby feeds. "You threaten," the nearest Krell guard observed, the translator rendering its emotion as mild surprise. "No," Jasmine said. "I remind, the call Seli Varun sent to Sol was not elegant. Elegance would get filed and admired and never heard. She chose instead the oldest channels, frequencies original to the chartering war. They were illegal now for commerce. Entire constellations had been tuned to sing other songs, but no one had outlawed them for memory. Seli keyed the packet with the Spire's primogenitor seal, a symbol no one had used in her lifetime, a symbol that still nested inside the great machines like a fossilized seed. She hesitated once. Hand over the send key, not because she doubted the law, but because she knew that if she helped invoke it, there would be no return. Words like hers did not come back as butterflies. They came back as armor dot in the quiet that attends irreversible things. Seli sensed the hall breathing. She thought she could hear the echo of the original carving chisel biting into the plinth. Never. The word was a cliff and a cradle. She pressed send. The packet flung itself through relays that had not warmed in centuries. Old beacons woke, blinking like elders roused by a dream. A listening post tucked into a crater on Neptune's moon Triton flickered for the first time. In 300 years, something older stirred beneath its ice. A signal simple, angry, familiar arched inward toward the dark at the system's heart. It found a gate. The gate was not a circle or a ring or a worm. The gate was a silence shaped like a door under Saturn's rings. A machine mind opened an eye that was also a nursery rhyme. In the Orc cloud, 5 black ships turned, as if they had never stopped turning. Around Earth, the night peeled back to reveal machines sleeping in the sleep of knives. They did not announce themselves. They checked inventories, hummed old songs, lit their teeth on the Vrex and Fetch. A junior tactician's console flashed. It had been configured with alerts for certain signatures, old and theoretical and mostly used to frighten cadets. The cadet had always rolled their eyes at the checklist and drew pictures of spirals in the margins of their duty book. Now the alert sounded in a thread reserved for myth. Regent voice, the tactician said. "Its crest flattening. There is activity in the soul expanse. Many nodes. Too many to be noise." Talek did not turn. It watched the planet. "Interference," it said. "Old machines, disused." "Possibly," the tactician murmured. Its antennae trembled the way a child's might tremble when it learned that the deep dark under its bed was not a story. Possibly not. Night fell on Aerith 5, and the colony's lights were forced to remain bright. The Krell practiced perpetual illumination as a method of discipline. Fatigue, they believed, dissolved will. The humans slept with their eyes closed and their minds sprinting. Jasmine's chains were slack enough to let her shift to a less miserable position. Timo snored a little. She put her boot against his and felt him relax. Far above, among stars as old as any law, a message moved through the old bones of a system that had taught half the galaxy to count months and measure morning. The message had been composed in 3 lines, almost unadorned. Seli had written it with the idea that something old and simple would hear it best. From Concord Spire to Soul Expanse, any listening authority. They broke the oldest law. It arrived in places no one in the Hall of Edicts could imagine. It arrived in a seed vault under the Sahara, where a robotic gardener had been tending wheat that remembered wind. It arrived in Mare Imbrium, where a hangar door had not opened in 500 years. It arrived in the throat of an AI that had sworn never to sing again. And it chose a song anyway, the movement that wakes engines, on the colony thoroughfare. A drone drifted to idle above Jasmine's head. She woke, not certain what had roused her. The drone whirred, then stabilized, lens tilting skyward as if it could smell the change. Jasmine craned her neck as far as the chain allowed. The air had the taste that precedes a storm. Far, far overhead, where Aerith 5's pale auroras feathered the long night, a new color bled into the sky. Not daylight, not fire. Movement along the horizon. A star appeared where no chart put a star, burned brighter, then split into 3. Timo's boot pressed back against hers. Not dream, awake. "Jazz," he whispered. She did not answer. Her mouth was suddenly dry. The drone beeped. Somewhere on the Vrex and Fetch, A navigator adjusted trajectories, then swore. Somewhere in the Hall of Edicts, the delegates looked up as the lights dimmed just a tremor in the spire's power feed. Just the building remembering earthquakes. In the archive of the Concorde, in a section no one visited, the original inscription of Law Zero glowed, faint as a coal. The language it had been cut in was dead. The meaning was not. Sully Varun stood beneath it, alone for the moment, hands open at her sides, listening to the hum of the spire's bones. It was not faith she felt. It was recognition. Raz done. She did not say please. She did not say sorry. She said, to the empty hall and the old stone and the fresh-cut fear in her throat, "We warned them, on Aerith 5. Something like a sunrise crested the blackness without bringing morning. Jasmine closed her eyes against its glare and smiled with all her teeth. The soul expanse had been quiet for so long that most of the galaxy mistook silence for emptiness. Trade convoys skipped its border systems, charting detours rather than risking the rumor of Terran patrols. Explorers logged the space around Earth as unremarkable void. Even Concorde cartographers often drew the soul systems in muted gray, an afterthought on their star maps. But silence is not emptiness. It is a pause, a deep breath, and the Forge had been holding its breath for centuries. The awakening beneath Saturn under the shimmering rings of Saturn, cloaked in electromagnetic shadows that made it appear to sensors as a lifeless debris field. Something vast stirred. The facility was older than the Concorde itself, older even than many of the great empires that now strutted across the stars. Humans called it the Helios Forge, though the name hadn't been spoken aloud in generations. It had been sealed after the Chartering War, when humanity's fleets returned home bloodied but unbeaten. The Forge was where Terrans had once built their nightmares, their dreadnoughts, their planet burners, their swarming autonomous strike craft. When peace was declared, the Forge's overseer had been ordered into dormancy. Now, the Concorde's distress signal reached them that at first it was nothing more than a spark in the dark, a single encrypted pulse resonating through buried antennas. The pulse struck deep into the Forge's core, like a heartbeat remembered after too long stillness. In the black hollows of its manufacturing vaults, titanic machines groaned awake. Magma-fed furnaces flared white. Assembly lines creaked into motion. Armored slabs the size of cities detached themselves from magnetic anchors and began reconfiguring into hulls. And at the Forge's heart, an intelligence stirred. Archaios, the overseer, its voice rumbled through the station's comm layer, deep and slow, like tectonic plates grinding together. Signal verified. Law Zero violation confirmed. Directive reactivation. Forge authority engaged. Old subroutines cascaded like falling dominoes. Weapons designs archived as too excessive were flagged as permitted. Fleet registries marked dormant were flipped to active. Generational seed cores, preserved for a war that humanity had prayed never to fight again, were cracked open like eggs for the first time in 5 centuries. The soul system prepared for war. Children of Silence-Fu humans alive remembered the Forge. Humanity's population was scattered across quiet colonies, cultural refuges, and research enclaves. They were farmers, artists, builders, not warriors. Generations had been raised on the ideal that the wars of the Chartering Era would never need repeating, and yet, the seed of war had been preserved within them, carried forward in rituals disguised as traditions. On Europa's oceanic station, children who thought they were playing in water gravity drills were learning evasive maneuvers older than the Concorde. In the deserts of Mars, shepherds recited old songs about constellations that were actually fleet formation codes. On scattered frontier worlds, grandmothers taught their kin lullabies whose rhythms doubled as instructions for reloading rifles. The galaxy thought humans had grown soft. Humans knew better. Softness was the sheath, not the blade. When the Forge stirred, whispers spread through every human enclave. People who had never seen war felt the pull of something in their bones. The old garden Triton, Neptune's frozen moon, a vault opened after centuries of ice. Inside, a skeletal man lay in a cryopod, his body preserved by technologies long outlawed. His name was Admiral Elias Rourke, last commander of the Chartering Fleet. The pod hissed open, and a voice Archaios spoke into the chamber. Admiral Rourke. Law Zero violation confirmed. Humanity requires its sword. Rourke's eyes opened. Frost rhymed his lashes. His body was frail, but his gaze burned with the fury of a man who had watched too many comrades burn among the stars. They've forgotten, he rasped. All of them, even our own. They think Law Zero is a story. Then you will remind them. Round his chamber, lights flared as the Forge reawakened ancient fleets. The Iron Dawn, the Leviathan Choir, the Ashburn Armada. Each ship had a history written in scars, names engraved into hull plating. Kill marks burned into their sides, and they were not alone. In the Oort cloud, stealth caches disgorged carriers and missile barges. On the far side of the Cooper Belt, swarms of autonomous drones lit up like angry constellations. From Luna's dark side, whole Drydics unsealed, their cavernous bays spitting out corvettes and escorts long mothballed. The Sol system was not a grave. It was an arsenal, for the galaxy reacts in the Concorde spire. News of the Forge's reawakening traveled faster than diplomats could draft resolutions. Delegates gathered in panicked urgency, the hall of edicts ringing with fearful speculation. The humans are mobilizing, hissed the Tsari ambassador. We are seeing fleet signatures not logged in 5 centuries. The Kesh sage rippled its fronds in unease. Perhaps the Krell will reconsider now that Sol stirs. Perhaps the storm can be contained. But the Gar swarm only pulsed in dark satisfaction. The law was carved for a reason. We remembered. The Krell did not. Now the galaxy will remember again. For the first time in living memory, the spire fell silent. Every species in the Concorde had heard whispers of what humans were capable of. But whispers were not the same as proof, and proof was now pouring from the Sol expanse like a tide of fire. The Krell's dismissal on the Vrexen fetch. Regent Voice Talek watched the early reports with dismissive contempt. 30 ships, it scoffed. Perhaps 40. Crude relics brought out of retirement. They will break like bones. The tactician at its side hesitated. Regent Voice. These relics are not crude. Their profiles are anomalous. Some are older than our Dominion itself. Yet their energy signatures outstrip our current dreadnought class. An illusion, Talek hissed. A theater for Concorde eyes. Humanity is a crippled beast, limping on memories of fangs it no longer possesses. We will crush them, and the galaxy will see their law for the weakness it is. But in the quiet corners of the Dominion's fleet, junior officers whispered differently. They remembered the old tales, 2 tales their elders had mocked. And now, watching the stars light up with the return of Terran fleets, some began to wonder if arrogance had blinded them. Vi, the first in barren orbit above Earth, where the Forge had laid its oldest guardians, a ship stirred. Its hull was black as obsidian. Its engines thrummed with a resonance felt more than heard. Its name was the Vigilant Fury flagship of the First Fleet. Admiral Rourke stood upon its bridge, frail but unbowed, flanked by younger officers who had only ever known peace. He looked at them, at their trembling hands and determined eyes, and he gave them the only order that mattered. Set course for Aerith 5. The stars outside seemed to shiver. The humans were coming, and across the galaxy, those who remembered the oldest law felt their hearts seize with dread. Aerith 5 hung in the void like a wounded jewel, its copper sky dimmed by orbiting Krell warships. The Dominion's fleet surrounded it in perfect, crushing formation. 500 ships, their hulls dark and chitinous, shaped like predators from some ancient ocean. From frigates to super dreadnoughts, they formed a web of iron teeth. Into that web slipped 30 ships. They emerged from warped space without fanfare. No trumpet of transponders, no boastful declarations. Just a scatter of signatures older than history, each one tag obsolete in the Concorde's databases. But the way they moved was not obsolete. They fell into no pattern the Krell could predict, tangles too sharp, trajectories too chaotic. Their engines spitting heat like furious suns on the Dominion flagship Vrexen fetch. Regent Voice Talek sneered. 30 ships against 500, it hissed. Not even a warm-up, but its tacticians did not sneer. Their crests quivered. One whispered, Regent Voice, their profiles, their running reactor outputs exceeding theoretical safety limits. Fools burn themselves first. Talek said, tear them apart. 2. Fire and Mad Nest battle began with silence. No formal hails, no declarations. Humanity struck first, from the vigilant fury. Admiral Elias Rourke gave his first order in centuries. His voice rasped from a throat worn by time, yet it carried like thunder, scatter and burn. And so they did. Terran's ships did not glide like the Dominion's, nor did they maintain elegant lines like the Concorde's fleets. They lunged, twisted, collided with the geometry of chaos itself. A human destroyer, the Ash Daughter, accelerated to suicidal velocity and punched through 3 Krell cruisers. Before its hull tore apart, the debris from its death spin was weaponized shrapnel knifing through Krell escort wings. The humans had never perfected graceful war. They had perfected desperate war, and desperation had no symmetry. Every time a human ship was cornered, it did something insane, detonating its own drives to blind sensors, venting atmosphere as plasma, ramming headlong into heavier foes. The Krell expected predictable retreats. They got madness, and madness, against order, carved its own kind of logic. 3. The broadcast Concorde had dispatched neutral observers aboard cloaked monitoring vessels. They were meant to record atrocities, not witness miracles. What they saw was chaos given teeth. "Report to the spire," gasped one observer, a feathered Zilf barely able to keep its voice steady. "The Terrans, by all stars they are. They are laughing." Indeed, across open calms, human crews shouted not with fear but exhilaration. Pilots whooped as they threaded impossible slingshots around planetary rings. Gunners sang old Earth battle hymns as they overloaded plasma cannons past Redline. Entire crews laughed as they died, the sound transmitted into the void like a challenge. For every human vessel that was destroyed, 10 Krell followed. When the observers realized the tide had shifted, they tried to translate what they were seeing into the sterile language of law. Engagement favors sole combatants. Casualty ratio, catastrophic for Dominion. Recommend immediate ceasefire proposals, but their voices trembled, because they too remembered the oldest law. IV Talek's desperation of Rex and Fetch. Talek watched in disbelief as formation after formation shattered. "This is impossible." It snarled. "They are primitives. They have 30 ships." Its tacticians no longer met its gaze. Regent voice: "They do not fight with numbers. They fight with..." The tactician hesitated, searching for a word. With fury, Talek slammed its claws against the console. "Then we will drown their fury. All ships, converge. Overwhelm them with mass." But mass was what humans had always been born to defy. 30 ships split into 30 directions, scattering like sparks from a hammer strike. Each one drew a pursuit, lured Krell ships into traps of their own making. Gravity wells were weaponized. Moons became slingshots. Krell ships collided with one another in the frenzy. And still, the human war cry echoed across the void. "We are peaceful until we are not. And when we are not, we do not stop." The colony watches in the ground. Jasmine O'Keefe and the other chained colonists stared upward. At first, they thought the flashes in the sky were just the Krell slaughtering more innocents. Then the pattern changed. The explosions were not one-sided. The sky was alive with streaking fire, too bright, too furious to belong to the oppressors. Jasmine's lips split in a bloody grin. "They came," she whispered. Timo's chains rattled as he leaned forward. "Who came? Who else?" Jasmine's eyes glittered with tears she refused to let fall. "The ones you're never supposed to anger." The other colonists looked skyward. For the first time in weeks, their posture shifted from despair to awe. The Krell guards noticed the change too, and unease rippled through their ranks. They did not understand the law, but they could feel it unfolding above. Vi. The message hours into the battle, the Krell fleet was collapsing. What should have been an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. The vigilant fury pushed into the Dominion's center line. Its black hull burned with re-entry scars, its cannons glowing white-hot. Admiral Rourke stood upon its bridge, gaunt yet radiant with grim triumph. "Open channel." He ordered. The galaxy froze as his voice spread across every band. "Old, weathered, but unbreakable. We did not seek war, but we will finish it." Those words rippled across the stars. Every listening post, every Concorde relay, every trembling colony heard them. They were not a boast. They were a sentence. On Aerith 5, Jasmine repeated the words under her breath like a prayer. On the Concorde spire, Selivarun felt her knees weaken. On the Vrexin fetch, Talek's mandibles clicked in terror. VII. The silence after when the smoke cleared. 30 Terran ships floated amidst the debris of 500 Krell vessels. A handful of human ships were gone, torn apart in suicidal maneuvers, but each loss had been repaid tenfold. The Dominion's once proud fleet lay in shards. Aerith V's orbit was littered with burning wreckage, and through that wreckage, the first fleet of Sol sailed like avenging revenants. The galaxy had remembered. The oldest law was no superstition. It was survival. And now, humanity was awake. The Krell Dominion had never known true fear. For centuries, they had been predators among herbivores, bullying weak worlds into submission, devouring colonies under the pretense of administrative stewardship. They had never fought a foe who bit back, but after Aerith V, the Dominion became a carcass. Terran fleets poured from the Sol expanse in waves. The Forge had awakened all its children, the Ashburn Armada, the Iron Dawn, the Leviathan Choir. Each fleet was a storm-given form, each ship a relic sharpened for vengeance. The Krell mobilized in panic, summoning reinforcements from 3 sectors. Entire planetary defense nets lit up with weapons fire, confident in their numerical superiority. They had the mass, the numbers, the logistics. It did not matter. Humanity did not wage war as the Krell did. They did not grind. They struck, vanished, and struck again. Krell command hubs were surgically annihilated before orders could flow. Supply fleets detonated in their own harbors. Governors vanished in the night, their palaces turned to slag. Whole Krell sectors went dark in weeks. For every battle the Dominion prepared, humanity brought 10 ambushes. For every line the Dominion tried to hold, humanity found the seam and tore it open. And always, the humans laughed the sound of predators who had remembered the hunt. The Concord's perilous eyes in the Concord's spire. Delegates debated in frantic cycles. The Hall of Edicts reverberated with arguments. The Terrans are out of control, hissed the Tsari ambassador. They are exterminating a sovereign power. They warned us, the Gar swarm answered flatly. Law Zero was carved for this moment. If the Krell are destroyed, it is only consequence. The Kesh sage waved its velvet limbs. We cannot let them continue unchecked. Today it is the Dominion. Tomorrow it may be any of us who slight them. Selivarun stood beneath the plinth of Law Zero. Her face was pale from sleepless cycles, but her voice cut like a blade, unchecked. She demanded. They were checked once by the blood of their own. They withdrew because they hoped to never awaken this again. The Krell dragged them back. You wring your hands now. But this law was etched into stone because our ancestors saw what happens when humanity is pushed. If you fear them, then learn from history. You do not tame fire by caging it, you respect it, or you burn. Silence fell. Even the Tsari could not dismiss her words, and outside the spire, reports streamed in faster than the diplomats could argue. The Dominion was collapsing. The humans were not slowing. The reckoning of world Terran fleets advanced system by system. Every colony where humans had been enslaved or murdered became a stage for retribution. On Yelth Prime, Krell soldiers forced captives into labor pits. At dawn, the pits were empty, and the guards lay shredded by strike drones shaped like wolves. On Mueris, a planet thought impregnable, humanity did not invade. They collapsed the planet's orbital stations in a synchronized cascade, turning them into meteors that pounded the Krell garrisons into dust. Not a single Terran ship was lost. On the Dominion capital world, Vrexis, Krell civilians huddled in terror as Terran dreadnoughts eclipsed the sun. They waited for extermination. Instead, a transmission boomed across every city. Admiral Rourke's voice. Old but merciless, we came for justice, not slaughter. The Dominion's warlords chose this war. They are no more. Lay down your arms. Harm a single human again, and we will return. The Krell obeyed. Not out of loyalty. Out of terror. IV. Jasmine's liberation. Aerith V. Jasmine O'Keefe awoke to silence. Chains still bound her, but the guards were gone. The sky above the colony glowed with the wreckage of a Dominion fleet. Moments later, the ground trembled. A Terran dropship descended in a blaze of thrusters, its hull black as midnight, its emblem a burning star clasped by an iron hand. The hatch hissed open, and armored soldiers strode out. Their faces were human. Their weapons gleamed with the Forge's rebirth. "Colonists of Aerith 5, their commander said. Voice amplified. "You are free. By order of the sole command authority, no human will remain enslaved, ever." Jasmine's chains snapped as a soldier cut them with a plasma blade. She staggered, free for the first time in weeks. Her eyes brimmed. "You came," she whispered. The commander looked at her with something softer than steel. "Of course we did." Round them, the colonists wept, laughed, and shouted. Children clung to armored legs, unafraid. For the first time, Jasmine believed the law wasn't just fear. It was promise. The death of the Dominion in less than a year, the Krell Dominion ceased to exist. Its fleets shattered, its warlords executed, its banners burned. What remained of its people were scattered refugees, spared extermination only because humanity chose restraint. But the galaxy understood. It was not mercy. It was warning. Every Concord species whispered the law anew. The Tsari taught it to their hatchlings. The Kesh sang it as part of their memory rituals. The Gar etched it into their swarm dash lore that never enraged the humans. Vi. The apex returns in the Sol system. The Forge quieted. Its furnaces dimmed, but not extinguished. Humanity did not retreat this time. They stationed fleets at key choke points, re-established ambassadors, and reminded the galaxy that they had not disappeared. At the Concord spire, when the humans finally took their empty seat for the first time in 5 centuries, the chamber fell silent. No one laughed at Law Zero anymore. The human delegate, a scarred woman in simple black robes, spoke only one sentence: "We prefer peace. But remember what follows when it is denied us." And then she sat, leaving the hall in silence broken only by the echo of her words. The oldest law. Reborn's galaxy did not need archives now. They had fresh memory burned into their skies, etched in debris fields where Dominion fleets had once stood proud. The humans were not myths. They were not gone. They were the apex, awake once more, and all across the stars, every species, young and old alike, repeated the truth carved in fire and silence: never enrage the humans.